It's 1 o'clock, so we're going to officially start class now. So for everybody that's joined, my name is Karen, and I'm going to be the lead Android instructor for this class. I do Android programming for a living, and before that, I was doing some of like back-end stuff, a lot of Java, and most of the reason of how I got into Android itself is because I already knew Java, and I was like, hey, I know Java, I have an Android phone, it'd be pretty cool to build apps. And so yeah, that's where I am today. And we also have a group of really awesome TAs that will be helping everybody out during our labs. So I like to give them a chance to introduce themselves as well. So is Anushree here? Anushree? Okay, that's fine. Is Dennis here? Dennis is another awesome TA part of the class. I can hear you, but you're sounding a bit, yeah, it's sounding a bit pitchy.
Okay, so I'm Dennis. I'm software engineer at education.com, and I'm responsible for all mobile initiatives in the company. So it's Android app and iOS. I did some, I'm alumni of CodePass, as well as a Udacity nano degree for Android nano degree. So I did some native mobile development for an Android, and I hope my knowledge will be useful for you for your code labs today and hopefully in the future.
Cool. Is Santosh here?
Hey, hi guys. My name is Santosha, and I actually work at LinkedIn. I'm an Android engineer there. So I'm looking forward to working with you guys, and hopefully I can help you out with all the code, during the code lab sessions.
Cool, thanks. And Siddhi?
Hi guys, I'm Siddhi. I work at a startup known as Hoku Pop. I'm an Android developer there, and I look forward to work with you all.
Awesome. And then we're gonna go back to Anushree if you're here now. Nope, that's okay. Okay, Anushree is also another one of our TAs, and she's really awesome as well. So those are the TAs, and they'll be helping out in the labs once we break out into groups. And if you have questions, they've been doing Android development full-time for a really long time, and they're all really good at it. So if you have any kind of questions, reach out to them for sure. All right. Oh, Anushree's here. Cool. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Anu. So I work at YouTube and on Android development. Nice, man. I'm looking forward to meet you all.
Awesome, so that's our whole TA team. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen to present. All right, so this is gonna be our first technical lab. So I wanted to start off by kind of going over why is this like such a great time to be a mobile developer right now? What do you guys think about the development for what it's like to be a mobile developer? Why do you think are some of the things that might make you excited for this right now? Like what gets you excited about mobile development? So when I ask questions, usually I'm gonna look for answers in the Zoom chat. So when I ask questions, you could type in your answers on Zoom chat. I'll kind of like scroll through it and respond to that way. Yeah, so some people are saying it's a huge industry. There's lots of opportunities. Mobile phones make things so much easier. There's so many work opportunities. Yeah, the money, the ads. Yeah, these are all exactly the kind of things I had in mind as well. So I looked it up today right before class, and I saw this statistic that I thought was really interesting. So 2.5 billion people in the world are estimated to gonna have a smartphone in 2019. That's crazy. 2.5 billion people is like more than 30% of all the people in the world. That's not just even America. That's like literally everywhere in the world. 30% of people are gonna have some kind of smartphone inside their pockets that they're bringing around every day. And this is crazy because if you're a mobile developer, that means you have a lot of power to put what goes on into these people's phones, right? And so you have the chance to put something into 30% of the people's phones. What do you think? Whatever you think is helpful. That's crazy. That's a lot of power. And kind of comparing, you might be thinking, hey man, everybody has like an Apple phone. So why should we even be doing Android? But then I looked up the statistics about how many people actually use Android phones, and it's actually a lot more than people who have Apple phones. So the blue line in the graph is how many people own Google Android phones. And you can see it's a lot bigger than every other kind of platform. So compared to like the people who use Apple iOS phones, it's kind of getting to be about the same, but it's still leading by a giant margin. And this is mostly because people in different countries outside of America usually have Android phones instead of Apple phones. So the other thing that some people mention is, yes, there are so many employment opportunities right now. So you might be thinking, hey, is this going to be a really saturated field where there's way too many developers and not enough people to employ these developers? Well, that's actually like not true at all. So I wanted to show you guys something that I didn't think would be possible when I first graduated college. So these are some of the recruitment emails that I get from all kinds of companies. So I just highlighted a few of them. So this is like one from Airbnb. So I literally get recruitment emails from companies all the time asking me if I want to interview with them. It's like this one from Airbnb, this one for Facebook. It's like, it's really funny. They even say like, we probably reached out to you about a dozen times by now. And they totally have. They literally email me every month asking if I want to interview. People from like Google. Google is a little bit more selective. I get a little less recruitment emails from them. But it's just crazy thinking about how 5 years ago, I would have never expected this. Like if you told me when I was in college that people are literally going to come ask me to interview for them, I would have been like, you're crazy. I don't even know anything. I don't know how to do anything. But 5 years later, after building Android apps for a couple more years, people are literally going to reach out to you and say, hey man, you should come work with us. Things are going to be so awesome. You have all these skills that we need. It'd be great to have you here. So it's really crazy thinking about all the opportunities that are available. And I know people say it all the time, but I just wanted to give everybody an example of, hey, this is actually true. Like people are literally going to be asking you to work for them. Like all these big companies, small companies, all kinds of companies. So that's kind of my little spiel about, hey, why you should care about mobile development and why being good at mobile development could get you really far in your career. So moving on to Technical Labs, which is what we're going to be doing today. Like what exactly is Technical Labs? So the main goal of Technical Labs is we're going to be building real working apps. So these are apps that if you have an Android phone, you can literally put on your Android phone and run and do stuff with it. So this is the main goal of Technical Labs. We're going to actually make apps to run on real Android phones. Second thing is we wanted to introduce like fundamental Android concepts. So these labs are not meant to teach you literally everything about Android because there's way too much to know about Android, right? So we only have 4 of these technical labs, and the point of these labs is to kind of teach you the fundamental concepts so that you can kind of say, hey, I have this idea. I kind of know how Android works, and I kind of know how to do this. If you have an idea, you should be able to go build it and maybe go Google around for more resources on how to do certain things. And the last thing is we wanted these technical labs to be really collaborative. So we wanted to put everybody in groups to be able to like kind of learn together, to explore together and experiment with what you can do together. So one of the things that really held me back when I was trying to learn Android in college was the fact that I didn't have enough resources or people to work with. So sometimes I would get stuck on something and I get frustrated and then I wouldn't be able to continue doing something. And so that's kind of what we want to help you get over in these kind of labs, is to have people around you that you feel like you could get support and help from. And that's what mostly your classmates are for, and the TAs and myself included. So to start off, before we get into the technical stuff, I wanted us to think about what are some things that we might need to know in order to build a popular Android app. So think about like your favorite Android app that you have right now or that you use on a regular basis. Like what do you think are some things you might need to learn how to do in order to build it? So you could take like Facebook, for example. Like what do you guys think would be some things that you would need to learn how to do in order to build it? So I'm going to be looking in the chat for answers here. How to build UI, yeah, and animations. You need to be good at Java, databases, app design. You need to know how to do like networking. You need to know your audience. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying you really need to know UI and how to use APIs. You need to know how to use Android Studio. Yeah, so these are all like very similar, right? So a lot of people are saying you need to know how to build UI. You need to know how to do some like database kind of stuff. You need to know how to use Android Studio. So yeah, so it all really boils down to just 4 things. So the first thing is you need to know how to show data, right? So your app needs to show some kind of data. It needs to be either text or images or videos. So that's the first thing that you need to learn how to do in order to build an Android app. You need to be able to show these kind of things to your users. Second thing is you need to be able to let users create content, and you need to be able to let them go through different kinds of flows. So for example, if you're on Instagram, your app needs to be able to let the user post a picture. And so the process of posting a picture takes them to different screens. So you need to be able to know how to make those different screens and be able to let them create content. Third thing is you need to let people save data, because it wouldn't be very fun if your app just let people did all this stuff and then it went away and didn't get saved anywhere. So that's the third thing. And that kind of relates to what people were saying about databases, saving data. And the fourth thing is what a lot of people touched on is your app needs to look nice, right? Because nobody wants to use an app that's just like black and white and has like the regular text views and nobody really wants to look at. So those are the four things that pretty much lets you build any kind of Android app you want. And just to kind of like look at that a little bit further, if we look at these three very different apps, we have Instagram, we have Snapchat, and we have Messenger, right? So these are three really different apps, but really in the back, they're all doing like these four things really well, right? They're displaying data. So they're just, for Instagram, they're displaying pictures. For Snapchat, they're displaying pictures, videos. For Messenger, they're just displaying some text messages. The second thing is they let users create content. And the third thing is they save the data in some way. And the fourth thing is they all look really nice, right? They don't look like a generic app that anybody could build. They all have like special UI and special things that make the branding about it really special. So even though these are like three really popular apps that do a lot of stuff, in the end, they're really only doing these four things really well. So that's kind of what we're going to try to do. So be able to learn how to do these four things really well in each of these technical apps. Snapchat is pretty terrible on Android. So as a progression of going through these technical labs, we're going to be building out a flashcard app. So what happens is for each lab, we're going to add new features to our flashcard app so that in the end, we have this like really amazing flashcard app. So the first lab that we're going to do today, we're going to focus just on building layouts in the UI and handling user interaction. And then we're going to have lab 2, 3, and 4. And each of this is going to take one lab. And each lab, we're going to focus on one specific thing. So the first lab, we're just kind of focusing on building layouts and handling the user interaction. So for this first lab, like I said before, we're going to focus on building UI. So that's the first concept that we're going to touch on. The second concept we're going to touch on is how do we handle like simple user interactions, like clicking stuff or basically just clicking stuff for this first lab. And the third thing that I think is really important is we're going to learn how to manage our code and collaborate. Some people may already be a bit familiar with Git and GitHub, and some people, this might be their first time working with it. So that's one of the things we're going to get really comfortable with this time. So this is a preview of what we're all going to be building for our first lab. So for this first lab, we're going to just be able to display a question. So my question is, who is the 44th president of the United States? And then when I click on my question, we're going to show the answer to the question, which is Barack Obama. So this might look kind of simple right now, but just by building out this flow right here, we're already covering a lot of the very fundamental Android concepts. So we're going to be able to cover activities in Android, layouts in Android, listeners in Android, and we're going to go over how to use GitHub. So this is like the basic version of what people can build out for this first lab. However, if you have more time and if you're like really motivated, we added in some optionals for people who wanted to kind of explore this further. And so this is what your app could look like if you decide to build in some of our optional features. So as you can see, for this more advanced version with the optional features built in, the app looks a little nicer. There's like some styling involved where the question has like a little border and has like rounded corners, and you can see multiple choice answers under it. And when you click on a certain answer, it shows you whether you got the answer right or wrong. So these are all optional features that you don't have to finish, but if you feel really motivated and you have time afterwards, you could definitely try to work on some of these optional features. So before we all start, is there any questions so far? I'm gonna take some time to answer some questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna jump into some of the concepts that I said we would be introducing today. Yeah, so someone asked, why did we choose to build a flashcard app? So we thought about what we think would make everybody interested. And I personally thought when I was in school, like I definitely needed flashcards. And usually I just wrote them on like note cards. And that's like not very reusable, right? Because you get lost, get thrown. So I was like, hey, we thought, hey, a flashcard app could be really cool because everybody's in college and everybody needs to study. And this is the kind of app where you could use on a daily basis when it's done. And the great thing about that is once you use an app on a daily basis, you start thinking about things that you want to add to the app, right? Like Facebook or Instagram. I bet there's tons of features that you think would be really cool in those apps. So that's kind of the idea behind the flashcard app. We're hoping that everybody will continue using it once the class ends or even during class. And then you'll come up with features that you want to build yourself, and you'll go around and look up how to do certain stuff and be able to add to your own app. So being able to create an app that you'll use yourself on a daily basis. Yeah, kind of like Quizlet, but everybody's flashcard app will be way better than Quizlet. All right, so I'm going to go into some of the concepts that we're going to be introducing in this lab. So the first concept that everybody might be a little bit familiar with from the pre-work is activities. So Android's activities are something that is very common. So all apps, when you think about it, have at least one screen that the user can interact with, right? And in Android, we call every screen in an app an activity. So activities are where we're going to write Java code to handle logic for certain user interactions, change what's on the screen, and a lot more. So activities are very common because every single app has at least one activity. And each screen in an app usually represents an activity. So that's why activities are so common, because every app needs at least one screen, and every screen is an activity. The other thing that we're going to cover is layouts. So in Android, everything that you see displayed on the screen is usually designed in these files that are XML based. So layouts are usually composed of a lot of views like buttons and text views and image views. And XML is this type of language that lets us add certain views and position them and customize them. So XML layouts are where we add these views and where we customize them. So kind of bridging these things together, we have a main activity.java class. So the Java class is the one that handles user interaction, right? And then we have an XML class, which we name similar to our activity class. So, and then the XML class is the one that sets up different views and the place where we style things. And these two classes, these two files are bridged together with this line called setContentView. So just because like main activity.java has a really similar name to activity_main doesn't mean they're automatically connected. So the way that they're connected is with this line called setContentView. And so inside main activity, when you see the line setContentView, that means that this layout, this XML layout, is the one that's bridged to the main activity file. The other thing that we're kind of going to go over in lab today is listeners. So if you think about it, all apps need to handle different types of user interactions, right? And listeners are Android's way of listening for these different types of user actions and reacting to it. So the most common type of user action is just a single tap, right? So when you're like opening up an app and you tap around, every time you tap, this thing called an on-click listener gets fired, and that's how we handle, or that's how apps handle how users interact with apps. So if you see an image and you click on it, something called an on-click listener will get called, and whatever kind of code you have inside this on-click listener is the code that gets fired off. And the last thing that we're gonna work with today is something called GitHub. So GitHub is basically a way to control your code in a versioning system. And so when you're working on a code base, things can get messy really quickly, especially if there's like a lot of people working on the same code, right? So GitHub is like the industry standard for a way to save your code, have your code living on the internet so other people can see it, and a way for you to collaborate with others. So I know some people already have a bit of experience with GitHub and some people might be really new to it, but today everybody's gonna get really familiar with GitHub. Yeah, so the other thing that I saw a lot of people worry about last week was navigating Android Studio. Does anybody have any like specific questions or concerns about how Android Studio works? So I did put together a very small guide for starting Android Studio. It has some like very common commands that you can use or shortcuts that you can use, and also some ways for you to debug your code if things go wrong. Android Studio uses Java and this other Android Studio. You can use almost any kind of code in Android Studio, but most people use Java or this other language called Kotlin. There's not a specific like version that you need for Android Studio, I don't think. Yeah, so Android Studio is a bit complicated. There's like a ton going on. So it might get a bit of time to get used to it, but once you get used to it, it becomes really helpful. Yeah, so someone asked if there's any kind of settings or screen layouts that I would recommend. I usually just use the default. Yeah, so someone also mentioned that they can't see the preview layout. So there's also a specific point inside the course portal that'll tell you how to resolve that issue. Cool, so that's all about all the labs and all the talks that we're covering. Now I'm gonna jump into how these labs actually work. So whenever there's a lab week, there will be 4 different tabs inside the course portal, and this is kind of a navigation overview of how you can navigate it. So the first tab is the overview tab. So this is just a quick summary of what we're trying to accomplish this week, along with submission instructions. So this is the first place you probably want to go to get an overview of, hey, what this week is about, what we're going to do this week, how things are going to work. The second tab is going to be the actual lab tab. So this tab is going to be where all the required and optional tasks are going to be given to you. So you see there's going to be a section of goals, like the goals is what we're going to try to accomplish in this lab. And below that, we're going to go through a couple like features that you're going to implement as part of this lab. So this is the walkthrough of everything you're going to implement for this lab. The third tab is the skills tab. So the skills tab is basically like a quick summary of all these like new concepts that we're learning as part of this lab. So like, oh, what is a min SDK? Like, why did we have to set a min SDK to 23 in this lab? What is a relative layout? So this is the place where you go for a quick overview of a one-sentence summary of things you didn't quite understand. And the last lab that's interesting is the resources lab. So this lab is for people, if you run out of time, you definitely don't have to visit this tab. But this is for people who like find something really interesting, like, oh, this is cool. Like, what are some other shortcuts I can use to navigate around Android Studio? Or what exactly is a text view and how do I do more with text views? Or how do I like debug crashes in Android? So this is the tab where you go to if you're interested in learning about things further and deeper. So as I kind of mentioned before, for every lab, there's a set of required tasks and a set of optional tasks, right? So required tasks are the ones that you definitely have to finish and submit as part of your GIF before the end of the class. Optional tasks are usually more advanced and they're a bit harder, and they go into the concepts that we cover in more detail. So optional tasks lets you explore Android develop more, and you don't have to submit this, but these are for you to kind of like play around with when you have time. And for every task, we usually have a more detailed walkthrough guide. So if the task says something like, hey, display this view, and when you click on this view, you should show this other screen, you're like, I have no idea how to do that. So for every feature like that, we also have a more detailed walkthrough guide that will walk you step to step on how to implement that specific feature. So for these labs, how this is going to work is we're going to have these breakout rooms where there's going to be like, I think 46 people in each room. And this is kind of like everybody's just going to be working on their own project, but you're also in this like group setting where you could ask people questions if you end up having like problems, or we just have like general questions about something. So imagine it like you're actually in a class together and everybody has their video on, you're looking at everybody, but everybody's working individually, but you also have these resources to help you out if you get stuck. So the first thing you want to do is when you get into breakout groups, you want to turn on your camera because it's going to be really depressing. Everybody's just like interacting with black space, right? So the more people that turn on the camera, the more interactive it is and the more fun it will feel. And the second thing you want to do is you want to introduce yourself, because these are going to be random groups. So these aren't the same groups that you were paired with last week. So you want to introduce yourself, kind of just like, hey, my name is Karen, I'm from San Francisco, that kind of stuff. And the idea is that you want to be able to support your group members throughout the session, right? So if someone has an issue implementing a certain feature, or they have a bug working on a certain feature, kind of just like reach out and say, hey, how did you implement this kind of thing? And if you're able to help them debug the feature, that means you have a better understanding of what was going on, right? So this is kind of like a win-win for everybody. And the last thing that you could do is you'd also ask for help from TAs and instructors with this ask for help button that's in Zoom. So if you have Zoom, the software downloaded, and you're on the toolbar on the bottom, there's a specific button that says ask for help. And this is how you could like get certain TAs to come into your room specifically. Okay, so just to make sure people are paying attention. So if I have a question right now, I'm working on my lab, I'm like, hey, I have no idea how to do this. What is the first thing you should do if you have a question? I'm gonna look in the Zoom chat. Yeah, okay, great, everybody has been listening. Some people have not been listening. The first thing you should do is you should ask your group members. Okay, so you ask your group members and you didn't quite work it out. What should you do after you ask your group members? No, you have a problem, nobody knows how to solve it. What should you do now? Definitely do not panic. Yeah, so you should, if you ask your group members, they don't know the question, then you should ask for help from TAs with that button. And then if still the TAs, like if there's not enough TAs going around, then you could probably ask the question in Slack if it's really urgent. The fourth thing, the last thing is we wanted to point out that we also have this thing called discussions.codepath.com. So this is more like a forum where you could ask questions, and the response there will probably be slower. So it's probably more for use if it's like not actually class time and you have a certain question about something, or you have a problem implementing an optional feature. You can go on discussions.codepath.com to ask your question, and one of the TAs or the instructors will be able to answer your question. Yeah, so this is the structure for how you should ask questions if you have a question. First, you should ask people in your group. Nobody knows the answer, you should ask for help from a TA. If there's no TAs available, maybe Slack. And the last resort is asking on discussions.codepath. All right, so that was everything I had to explain. So now I think we're all ready to go work on the labs. So to start working on labs, everybody should go to the courses.codepath.com and click on the lab tab for week 2. And then from there, there's guides to help you work through tasks. And by the end of the lab, make sure you have created your README and submitted your project on GitHub. So just as a final reminder, your submission should have a GIF that shows your app displaying the question and displaying the answer when the question is tapped. So those are the minimum requirements for what your app should do by the end of the class. So now I think we're ready for breakout rooms, if Rona is here. Yeah, so don't worry too much about turning things in right at 3 o'clock because that's like 2 minutes away. But the general idea is that you can keep working on this lab until our next lab, which is 2 weeks from now. And the thing you would have to submit is the final GIF that shows displaying a question and then clicking on the question for the answer. So that can be turned in anytime before the next lab, which is 2 weeks from now. And also, if you have extra time to work on the optionals, you could also resubmit your app based on the extra optionals that you're able to do. Let's see. Yeah, so I was gonna ask if anybody had questions or concerns or thoughts or anything that they wanted to ask about. I know a lot of people had issues with their emulators and not having hardware acceleration turned on. So if you saw problems like that, I would go back to the email that you got for doing your pre-work, and there was a video specifically about how to enable hardware acceleration through your BIOS menu if you're on a Windows, or other steps. Is there any other question? I'm gonna look at the chat real fast to see if anybody else had questions. Yeah, so for the main requirements, you only have to turn in the thing that says, hey, show a question. And then when you click on the question, the answer is displayed. So that's all you have to turn in. And this isn't due until the next lab, which is 2 weeks from now. And on GitHub, you should push your whole project. So if you follow the steps on the guide about how to push your code to GitHub, that should push all the files that are included in your project onto GitHub. So that's what you have to push. Yeah, so if you have problems using GitHub, we also have a guide and it's linked in part of the lab. So hopefully that guide is enough. So some people also had problems like with showing preview in Android Studio, and I sent out a link on Slack. I don't know if everybody saw it, but it was like, basically you have to go into your styles file and change a couple things there. Yeah, so this is officially the end of the class. So it's 3 o'clock right now, so I don't want to keep anybody extra afterwards. But if anybody had questions, I'm happy to stay after until like we could talk for until like 3:30. So if you have just like general questions or thoughts or concerns, I'm going to be on here answering questions or just listening to all the concerns everybody has. So feel free to leave now if you're done and you have no questions, but also feel free to stay if you want to chat and listen to what everybody else is worried about. There isn't a room to help people fix stuff, but if people post in the group chat on Slack, maybe whoever has like answers for the questions can just answer there. Yeah, I know everybody's a little stressed out and this was a little chaotic, but it'll be a lot smoother next time. And now we know how everything works. Some tools to help fully prototype an app. Yeah, I don't really have much experience in prototyping apps, but the design tools that the design team uses in my work is something called Framer. So I have no idea. Unfortunately for XML codes, you can't add line, or sorry, is there a way to add line breaks? I'm not sure what line breaks means. You could do like a /n, and that will basically start a new line if you're writing text. Yeah, so you could definitely submit everything later. Nothing has to be submitted by the end of the day today. This assignment is officially due 2 weeks from now before the start of the next lab, technical lab. So that's two Saturdays from now. Yeah, so for some people who say that they saw text going off screen, that's probably like a problem with how the view itself was laid out. Like maybe the width was taking up too much space and it was too much space to fit into the screen itself. So you will have to play around with like the dimensions of your views. So the extra optional part of the assignment is on the same tab in the course portal. It's right under the required sections. And the first thing I think is like adding multiple choice or something, but it's on the same exact page where all the required features are.
Hey, Karen, quick question. For the readme.md from the first session, if we edited it, do we resubmit it or do we leave it as we submitted it in the first place?
Yeah, so you would have to resubmit everything.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so if you click the question and the answer is displayed below the question, that's like fine, but it'd be cool to work out how you can not do that. And I think the one line that needs to be removed is the one that says like position flashcard answer below flashcard question. So yeah, you don't have to submit anything right now. As long as you sign into Zoom, we know you're here. Just as long as you submit something before the next lab. Yeah, so if people have questions outside of Android, just about like software engineering or what it's like to be a full-time software developer, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. Or if you're just wondering like, hey, what is this class about? Where do I go from here? Like this could literally be questions about anything. It doesn't have to be about the lab that we worked on today specifically. It doesn't have to be about like Android specifically. Just any kind of questions you have pop into your mind. I'm happy to answer them right now. Or you could always feel free to reach out to me on Slack. I'm always on Slack and I'm pretty responsive. So don't feel shy. Definitely try to reach out or to any of the TAs. So I think Tim created a note with a list of all the TAs that are part of this class. If you want to, feel free to reach out to them and ask them any questions that you have because all the TAs are amazing as well. And they've been in this industry for a really long time too. Any other questions? Actually didn't lose that much sleep in college. It was okay. But back then it wasn't as competitive in computer science as it is now. So I'm sure it's a lot more intense now. Yeah, so you don't have to create a GIF for all the bonus features. You just need one GIF that shows your final app. So your one GIF should at least show some kind of display for the question. And then when the question is tapped, it should show the answer. So that's all that your GIF really has to show. But if you have extra features, your GIF could also walk through the features that you implemented there. Yeah, so coding, when I first started coding, it was actually really frustrating because it's really difficult to know what the computer wants, right? It complains so much. Like Android Studio complains all the time, and then I would be like, why are you complaining about my code? And it would be sometimes be something as simple as like missing a semicolon or missing a parentheses, right? So those kind of stuff, it's really hard in the beginning, getting used to it, getting used to like coding, getting used to like the syntax, and getting used to like making your code what the computer wants it to be. It just takes like really time and practice. So the more time you spend with it and the more time you spend like coding, like the more comfortable you'll feel with it. And before you even know it, it'll come as like, it'll be so easy. You won't have to think about adding those parentheses or those semicolons. So it's definitely really difficult the first time around, but it gets easier. Yeah, so to upload GIFs, you could go on Imgur, IMGUR, and from there you could upload GIFs or pictures or anything. Yeah, Google and Stack Overflow are great. So a lot of the questions that I come up with, like half the time I'm just on Stack Overflow looking it up anyway. So if you face a question like Android Studio gives you some obscure error message, the best thing to do is probably just to Google it and look at the Stack Overflow answers and see which one is like most highly voted. And usually that's the best way to go about solving the problem. Yeah, so for technical interviews, really these days, I think the best way to prepare is to go on this site called leetcode.com. It's LEETCODE. So leetcode.com has like a ton of interview questions. And these are interview questions sourced from like actual interviews, right? So people actually went to like Facebook or Google to interview and then posted the questions on here. So practicing those questions is probably the best start. Yeah, so the list of TAs is posted and pinned in the Slack channel. So the Slack channel for this course, if you go to the pinned items, one of the items is a list of all the TAs that's part of this course. I have a MacBook, but in college I did have a Windows. I didn't get MacBooks until I started working full time. Sorry, I don't really understand this question about starting implementation for main activity. If you are you kind of asking like how do you start writing code in it, or how do you start making main activity do stuff? You can feel free to like direct message me on Slack if you have like questions as well. Oh, right. So another thing that a lot of people faced was when they were trying to set like the onClick listener. So the block of code had to go into the onCreate method that was already there, right? Otherwise, your block code would be somewhere that nothing was able to call. So whenever you see code, it always has to, right now, we're putting our code into the onCreate method, and that allows that method to be called when that screen of the activity is shown. So I saw a lot of people having problems setting the onClick listener because they weren't putting that block code inside onCreate. So yeah, that's one of the main problems I did see. Yeah, so you have time to submit anytime between now and the next lab. We just didn't want anybody to have homework, and that's why we suggested everybody finish it and submit it before leaving class now. But yeah, if you have time to do the optionals, you want to resubmit, that's totally a thing. If you want more time to finish the actual required features, you could also do that and submit anytime. Is it bad having started computer science with no prior programming experience? No, I mean, I started computer science without any prior programming experience in college as well. I didn't start programming until my second year in college. So, and I'm doing just fine now. So it's definitely not a problem. Yeah, so Android Studio is actually the tool that everybody in the industry uses. That's why we kind of thought this would be the best tool for everybody to use in this class now. So Android Studio is definitely the thing that everybody at Facebook, everybody at like Google, everybody uses. How long did it take for me to get good in Java? I don't know. I'm still like not great, like super good at Java, but the first year was definitely really hard. I don't think I really got like good at it until like 2 or 3 years in. So it definitely takes some time because Java is a very big and complicated language that's been around for a long time. But once you get the hang of like coding, things will come easier after that. Yeah, so for people who have emulator problems, I'm gonna send out a link with common troubleshooting issues, but if you still have problems after that, feel free to message me directly on Slack to show me what your problem was, and we could go from there. So this question is, how do you tackle the problem of having no experience and no personal projects? Well, I think the thing to do there is really there's like so many people trying to find these like beginner software, or entry level software engineering jobs, that you definitely need something to help you stand out, right? So one of the things that could help you stand out is really awesome side projects that other people don't have, because that shows that you're interested in the field and it shows that you're willing to work outside of your normal classwork. So that's one thing. You definitely want to build something from there. And the other thing is just like send out a ton of resumes, because it's going to be really hard finding that first job, and you can't expect the path to be easy, and you should definitely expect a lot of rejections and a lot of hard work. But from there, you should definitely try to get like a first internship experience. And if you can't get a first internship experience, you definitely want to start building up your portfolio so you have things to show the future employers. Yeah, so my first internship was actually at DreamWorks. And I think I got that internship because I was really into animation when I was in college. I thought I really wanted to work at somewhere like Pixar or DreamWorks. So I took a bunch of like these specialized animation classes. And that's probably how I got my first DreamWorks internship. And once you get that first internship, things will just get a lot easier after that, because then people are like, oh, hey, this person has worked there. They know at least something about the software industry. And then from there, things get a little easier, and it's a little easier to get like interviews and stuff like that. But I literally just applied through the DreamWorks website. Like I went on DreamWorks and I went to like opportunities, and I saw that there were open positions for internships, and I just submitted my resume there. But that wasn't like the only resume I submitted, right? I also submitted like probably like 30 other resumes to 30 other different places. So how important are classes like computer architecture or discrete structures? I mean, they're pretty important because they teach you like the fundamentals of like, hey, how does a computer know how to run a certain program? Like, how does it go from bits and bytes to actually running something on your screen? So it's important in that kind of sense, but it's not as important in the sense that you probably won't be using most of these in your day-to-day jobs unless you have a position that's very specific to this kind of stuff. So it is important in understanding how like computers and programming works in general, but not as important in the sense that you probably won't use it in your day-to-day job. I've never heard of this Oracle certification for Java, so I'm not sure. It's probably not necessary for job interviews, but getting the certification, I imagine, is probably really helpful, because then you'll probably know a lot about Java. And if you really get a language and you're able to like answer questions when people ask you specifically in Java, then that's a really good thing during interviews. So there's about 40 people still on Slack. Still happy to answer any questions. So when I applied to DreamWorks, it was my junior year, and I had already taken like data structures and algorithms, and then I had already taken like some random animation classes on how to use a specific animation software. But other than that, I really didn't have much experience. So I think now the industry standard is, as long as you've taken data structures and algorithms, that's enough to start applying for internships, because that class is really important, because it's where most of the questions that companies ask come from. Like, how do you find an element in a binary search tree? Or how do you find the biggest element in a binary tree? Stuff like that. So that class is really important. And once you've done that class, you should feel free to start applying to anything, really. Just start applying. Yeah, so this question is, should you learn stuff on your own to get into an entry-level job or internship? So this is like kind of hard, because I mean, technically you could, like, for example, the Facebook interview process is pretty simple. You have one call with a recruiter, and then you have one phone screen that's like an hour. In the 1 hour phone screen, they'll ask you questions like, given this string, like determine if this string is an anagram. that one's a really simple example, but it'll be something along the lines of that. And then once you do well on that, you do another phone screen of the similar kind of difficulty where you answer some programming questions. So really in these like couple of phone screens, you're really not answering much besides questions about data structures and algorithms. And that's why I'm kind of thinking, as long as you've taken that class at college, you should start applying and start practicing on LeetCode. But the thing is, should you try to learn stuff on your own? That's a hard question to answer, because you should definitely do that because it helps you stand out, right? So for example, this summer, we were looking for interns at my company, and we got over like 100 resumes. And these were all like 100 really great resumes. So once you have 100 resumes, like how are you gonna pick out which ones you actually want to interview? So that's where people started standing out with these extra like side projects that they did, or these extra skills that they had learned. And that's how we started filtering the resumes to be able to bring people to actually interview. So it's hard because like you need to stand out in some way, and that's where you want to learn extra stuff and be able to do stuff that other candidates haven't. But at the same time, once you actually get to the interview process, a lot of it is actually just about being able to answer these kind of coded questions that you see on LeetCode. Yeah, so LeetCode is a great place to practice data structures and algorithms. If you don't have a data structures and algorithms kind of class, there's classes on like Coursera. You could search like Coursera algorithms classes or Coursera data structure classes. So there's tons of classes on Coursera that go over the exact same material as you would see if you actually took a college course. Yeah, Project Euler is pretty cool. Project Euler, I think, is more like puzzle based, I think, and not as much as the kind of questions you would see in programming interviews. So Project Euler, I think, is cool in that you can like practice your thinking skills and analyzing skills, but it's not as similar as to the actual questions you would see in interviews. So the questions on LeetCode are like sometimes almost exactly the same as the questions you'll get in technical interviews. That's why it's so good and everybody's always on it. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think I'm gonna sign off now. I'm gonna give one more minute before I officially close everything. Okay, great. Hopefully I answered everybody's questions who had questions. I'm gonna send out some links for people who had issues setting up their emulators or had trouble running their emulators. But other than that, this was great. So see everybody in 2 weeks, or everybody still has class next week, but I'll be here in 2 weeks.